I was restrained by teachers, held down, I had fingers broken. Reality kicked in after 2 days of being in the school.
Did you always feel the threat of punishment?
Yeah, I was always worried of being violence involved as well, because the restraining wasn't restraining. It was, I'd have someone sat on my back, I'd have someone on one arm, someone on another arm. To the fact at some times I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. It was quite scary.
Over the past few months, former students have shared with us their experience of abuse while at the Red House Children's Home in the 80s and 90s.
There was no outsiders whatsoever. They didn't like it. It's us and that's it.
It was scary being a teenager. We couldn't get out of there. No one would listen to us.
More than 40 victims have come forward. They were branded liars and troubled teens. They say no one has claimed responsibility for what happened to them.
We have to ask the question, who is responsible? Is it the local council, the council that sent them there? Or is it the government? Someone has allowed this system to be set up.
The home was also a school, set up in a remote part of the east of England, run by a group from Denmark.
So the Tvind schools had very different ways of doing things.
As part of this investigation, we travelled to Denmark in search of answers and accountability.
He was a member for more than 15 years, and then he left and was a whistleblower and was one of the few people who's spoken out.
You could feel very safe until the moment you dare to doubt. It can be seen as a cult. I'm not a doubt about that.
Behind these bars was once a children's home and school. Hundreds of teenagers in care from across the UK were sent there between 1984 and 1998. It was called the Small School at Red House. Hayley was a student at the school.
They sold me this school saying it was amazing, I'd get to go on these holidays and there was going to be a good education there. Within a few days of being there, it was quite regimented and strict on rules and regulations. There were punishments for things we'd done wrong and some of the things we did wrong in my eyes weren't bad. Some situations I'd have 3 members of staff on me for an argument with another student. They'd come and grab us and it was quite scary.
And you were just a teenager
Yeah.
at the time.
Sorry. It's hard to look back on it really, because now I am who I am. It's quite, I can't believe I didn't have the strength to leave the place or get out of there. Well, I did, I tried to leave many times, but I'd always get taken back.
As well as years of mental and physical abuse, Hayley was also repeatedly raped.
I woke up with a man in my room. I couldn't see who the man was and I was sexually assaulted. Yeah, I was raped. And when I told the staff, it was just brushed under the carpet as if nothing had happened, that I was lying.
And what kind of impact did that have on you?
That I was a liar. I lived my life thinking I was a liar. No one would ever believe anything I said.
Kyle, not his real name, was 14 when he arrived at the Red House. It was just 2 days before the violence started.
An argument happened between me and the teacher. The next thing I know, I was being dragged out of the room, thrown downstairs, put me forcibly to the floor, face down, sat on top of me on my legs and sat on top of my back so I couldn't move. The other teacher come over, sat on my arm, leant on my fingers and that was that. Broke.
And broke your 2 of your fingers?
Yes.
Collective shaming was a part of the school's culture.
They would put a chair in the middle of the marble hall and they would sit you there in front of everybody. Now everybody would be quiet, silence, and then they'd humiliate you. They would allow students to come up to you, hit you in the face. There was teachers that come up, would shake you, slap you in front of all these people, and yet again beat you into submission.
The Red House was run by Tvind, a controversial Danish group founded by Amdi Petersen in the late 1960s. Its name taken from farming land in West Denmark, where the original school was established. They opened a number of radical schools in Denmark and 2 in England. An unconventional education system. Most students from the Red House left without any qualifications.
So it wasn't a school, and there was no school in the school. We didn't go to class. It wasn't a school at all. There was one building with 2 classrooms, but the classrooms were storage rooms, basically. They was made to look like they had a couple of computers in there, they had some books, so it was made to look like a classroom, but we didn't receive any education whatsoever from this. It was for show, for when social services would show up.
Instead, Tvind emphasised manual work and building links with developing countries, all the while growing its empire. Many students from the Red House travelled abroad for months at a time, including India.
They would take us on these so-called study trips. They wasn't study trips. We was taken there to go into the middle of nowhere and build latrines, build toilets, dig trenches. We're 14-year-old children. We're in blistering heat and we're digging trenches. This is not a study trip. This is slave labour.
When they returned to the home, they were isolated, miles from any town.
And this really is the middle of nowhere in Norfolk. I've spoken to multiple victims who ran away from the home across these very fields, desperate to escape the abuse.
In 1990, the Social Services Inspectorate warned local authorities against sending children to the Red House, listing allegations by pupils, such as sexual impropriety by a teacher from Denmark, physical abuse by teachers, and a rape on the school premises by 3 male pupils. The report concluded by saying there had been unsatisfactory practices upheld at the school and that there were serious concerns about the quality of care provided for the young people. And an inspection report from Norfolk County Council in 1994 reveals they were aware of suspected child abuse involving 20 victims, but the home continued to operate. By this point, Tvind ran aid organisations across the world. Danish authorities and even the FBI claim funds meant for charity were funneled into the accounts of Tvind's inner circle, known as the Teachers Group. In 2003, Tvind's leader Amdi Petersen and others from the group were put on trial in Denmark for fraud and embezzlement. Amdi was acquitted, but by the time the prosecution appealed, he'd fled to Mexico, where it's understood he still remains.
So I think they're using that as a back.
In Denmark, Tvind still divides opinion.
They objected to learning from books. A famous phrase that you cannot see the world if you look into a book. That was part anti-intellectual, but also it was the basic idea was that learning by doing is much better. Tvind has been criticized for having a cult-like aspect. Firstly, because when you enter the teachers group, you have to leave everything behind. Your old friends, your old, sometimes even your family.
How did 2 Tvind schools ended up being opened in the UK when this was a movement that began in Denmark?
There are basically 2 answers to that question. One is that the people behind want to spread the message. But on the other hand, it's also a business. Perhaps Tvind, for many years, expanded because they wanted to make money.
We're driving 4 hours north of Copenhagen to meet Steen Thompson. Now, he was the headmaster of Winsted Hall, which was the sister Tvind school in the UK, but he spent a lot of time at the Red House. But also he was a member of Tvind, and in particular the teachers group, that inner part of Tvind. He was a member for more than 15 years, and then he left and was a whistleblower and was one of the few people who's spoken out. So we're hoping he can provide a little bit of insight of what it was like being a member of Tvind itself.
People from across Denmark, like Steen, were drawn to the Tvind movement, the ideology and the charisma of its leader. They would give up their former lives, their salaries and valuable possessions and replace it with community living.
So we were kind of a group, a socialist young group of people. We wanted equality, and we wanted a better world. And this was the background for me and for the other people to start thinking about how can we have some force doing a change, making a change to the world for the better.
But in 1998, Steen left Tvind because of the way it ruled his life.
If I had a relationship to one of the women within the teachers group, it would also be controlled.
So you weren't even within the group if you wanted to date, form a relationship with somebody within the group. It had to be approved by Andy Peterson?
Yeah. Definitely if we wanted to marry, it would be difficult, or wanted to have children. It was very obvious that the teachers group in Denmark, Andy Peterson and his group around him, were controlling more and more all what happened around in the world.
When you left the teachers group, how did it feel at the time?
It was a mixture of being free and feeling guilty. Because you can maybe understand I was feeling free, but how could I feel guilty? I felt guilty because I was leaving my old friends. I knew that I was on a way I was betraying them.
More than 200 miles west of Denmark's capital, I head towards where Tvind was first established, in search of answers. While Tvind's schools have mostly closed in Denmark, Tvind still operates. Its iconic wind turbine, built by students, looms over the landscape. I'm at Tvind, and it's in a really remote area in West Denmark, and it's still operating as a teacher training college. Now, we know a former head teacher from the Red House works here, and we're going to try and speak to him about the abuse allegations. But the man, who can't be named for legal reasons, wouldn't speak to us on camera. He's denied physically abusing any children in his care or knowing about any abuse by his staff. Those working at Tvind say they are not associated with the former Tvind Corporation. Meanwhile, Andy Peterson, who's still believed to be in Mexico, did not respond to our interview request.
So he didn't actually need the money.
Back in the UK, and victims are being supported by the Shirley Oaks Survivors Association, who campaign over historic abuse in children's homes in London.
The organisation that ran the Red House was an international company. So who's responsible? The local council, the council that sent them there, or the government? I suggest all of them are responsible.
Norfolk County Council say the allegations made by former pupils of the independent small school at Red House are deeply concerning, and we have cooperated fully with investigations which relate to children that were placed there by other local authorities more than 30 years ago. The Red House was shut down in 1998. Norfolk police have done 2 investigations into allegations of abuse, but no one has been charged. Survivors are now in the process of suing Norfolk County Council and the local authorities which sent them to the home.
I ended up in a young offenders due to violence and alcohol. I've even lost my family to do with this Red House situation. None of them want to have anything to do with me because they say I live in the past, but it's because it's still in me now. And I have tried to take my life on several occasions because I haven't been able to deal with what's happened to me.
There's still teachers out there and people from this organisation that are here in the UK. There are some spread around Europe as well that need to be brought to justice.
Tvind continues to be a powerful force in many people's lives, but victims now want accountability for failures in a system which was meant to protect them.